5:30. It is 5:34. Welcome to JIAS, the Johannesburg Institute for Advanced Study. The Vice-Chancellor was here, was it 3 weeks or so, Vice-Chancellor, to talk about rationality, and he is back. Yes. He is back to talk about something that I think all of us care about, especially most of us who fly. I mean, we want to know what is going on. But I thought before I invite the Vice-Chancellor to come and speak, I do not know how many of you are aware of this. The Vice-Chancellor was appointed by the President about an hour or so ago. As a deputy to the President has established a presidential commission on the 4th Industrial Revolution. Now, the chair of that commission is the President himself, and his deputy is our own Vice-Chancellor. Now, I told him that he is getting close to the position of being President. If you are a deputy to the President for anything, it means you are quite close, and you are appointed by the President himself. And thank you to all of you for coming. I mean, I know it is late in the afternoon. Thank you for coming to JIAS. And if you are coming for the first time, we invite you to come again. We have made a habit of doing these things, and we are doing them pretty well, to have events like this. Literally 3 or 4 times a week now, we have an event. Just look out for advertisements. Professor Marwala, when I spoke to him about 3 weeks ago, and he told me that he wanted to come talk about what happened to the Ethiopian Airlines, I was like, now I really want to understand. Because I'm going to be flying out internationally very soon. I do not want to be one of the victims. So hopefully we'll understand better this evening. Professor Marwala doesn't want any introduction. Vice-Chancellor, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening. So I'm going to be talking about when robots become unstable, and then in particular we'll be talking about the Ethiopian Boeing 737 MAX disaster. What people probably don't know is that I used to be very passionate about the aerospace industry during my younger days. In fact, when I was an undergraduate student, I used to be the secretary of an organization called Students for Exploration and Development of Space. I was very, very active. And then when I started my research career, which was on structural integrity of structures, whether they are frames or actually it was in aerospace engineering. So much of my earlier publications were in the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics Journal. So when this disaster happened, I was obviously sad. But I also felt that probably it will be important for us to educate ourselves as to what is going on in this space. So now, what happened to Boeing 737 MAX? We know that Boeing is a big American company that dominates the manufacturing of aircraft. Is one of the largest suppliers to the US government. Now, what happened here in Ethiopia, Addis? So 8 minutes after taking off, it basically crashed, killing 157 people on board. Apparently 3 minutes after taking off, the captain of this aircraft requested to return the aircraft back to the runway. I was reading today that the pilot the investigation has found out that the pilots were not at fault. But 6 months before this accident, the Lion Airline Boeing 737 MAX also crashed, but in Indonesia, 13 minutes after taking off, killing 189 people. Now, in probability theory, if something happens once, perhaps it's an accident. If it happens twice, almost along the same lines of circumstances, then you start becoming suspicious. There must be some confounding variable that has caused the crash. So it seems there is a systematic problem with this aircraft. The fact that it happened within 6 months of each other is also a cause of concern. And by the way, many aeroplane accidents normally happen just before takeoff or just landing. That is the most dangerous time. At one point, I was flying from London to Charles de Gaulle on my way to South Africa. And then we landed on the runway, and the aircraft took off again. Of course, everybody was very, very quiet. In circumstances like this, people tend to become very, very quiet. And apparently, this was when I was a PhD student, apparently it was because there was another aircraft on the runway. And then a few years later, about 10 years ago, I went to Toulouse, the place where they make Airbus. And when we were returning and when we were coming back to Charles de Gaulle, the aircraft landed. You could see it is on the ground. Then it took off again. You know, when it happens twice, there must be some systematic issues around it. Now, this is what was publicized on CNBC, that bad data played a role in that crash. And I'll be able to illustrate where data fits into the picture when it comes to aerospace engineering. CNN also reported that the aircraft possessed a valid certificate of airworthiness. The crew obtained the necessary license and qualifications to conduct the flight. The takeoff roll appeared very normal, and the crew performed all the things they were supposed to do. What people don't actually see here is that it is also reported that when this aircraft was presented to the Air Authority, actually, apparently, Boeing did most of the testing itself. You know? So it was a player and a referee at the same time. So it's quite concerning. Now, what I first wanted to do was just to talk a little bit about flight dynamics, because for us to understand what really happened, we need to understand flight dynamics. The aircraft moves because of 3 maneuvers. It's called a roll. So a roll is when it does this. The second one is called a yaw. A yaw is when it rotates. And the third one is called a pitch. A pitch is either it is facing up or is facing horizontal or is facing down. So if it is facing up, it will be going up. If it is facing horizontal, it's going forward. And if it is facing down, it's going down. So in fact, the aircraft that's all it does. You know, roll, yaw, and pitch. Now what happens is that if the aircraft rolls too quickly, its wings can actually fracture. It loses its wings. If it yaws too quickly, then it loses its stability and come down. So this is really what flight dynamics is all about. And there are few forces that drive the aircraft. How many of you have done fluid mechanics? How many of you know what the Navier-Stokes equation is? You know it? And we'll talk about this because it is actually quite an interesting thing. So you have quite a number of forces. The first one is the weight. Then you have the thrust. And basically, the aircraft moves forward because it is emitting basically forces, and then it is pulled forward. And deep wings. So if it is cruising, then the angle of attack should be horizontal. If it is going up, it's like this. If it is going down, it's like this. You can see why. Because if it is like this, then the air hits the wing and it lifts up. And this is what we call the lift. And then you have another force called the drag force. The drag force is almost like when you get inside the pool and you try to walk inside the pool. You are almost being dragged backward, isn't it? That is the drag force. And outside the aircraft, you have air. And the air there is fluid. That's why the science of studying aircraft dynamics is basically fluid dynamics. So fluid is water in your swimming pool is fluid. Air is more complicated than water. The reason why it is more complicated than water is because by all accounts, water is deemed incompressible. It's called incompressible fluid. You can't compress it, whereas air is compressible. And as a result, there are some dynamics associated with this. So as the aircraft is moving, it collects data. What is the height? How fast is it going? What is its pitch angle? What are the angles of attack of the wings? All those factors are very, very important for the aircraft to fly stably. So if any of the measurements are not there, then you have a problem. I was reading on the newspaper that Boeing was suggesting that maybe they should have put more sensors. So in engineering, many engineering systems are actually over-designed. So if you wanted to design a bridge that will have 1 million cars driving over it per year, you normally design it for 3 or 4 million cars to drive over it. It's called safety factor. So there's quite a great deal of safety factor. So what Boeing was saying was that maybe we should have put more sensors so that if one sensor was not giving us the correct information, we can go to the second one or the third one and the fourth one. So this is really what they were saying. So now, what really happened to Boeing 737? It seems Boeing 37 MAX had a problem with the pitch maneuver. Still remember what a pitch maneuver is, isn't it? In other words, if it is going up, the system did not know that it was going up. If it is going down, the system did not know that it was going down. It seems the pilots of this family of aircrafts identified this problem. What we are told is that there was another situation which did not result in a crash, where they were pitching it up and it went down and they disconnected the autopilot. and flew it manually. But that one was saved. So it seems there was a problem with that pitch maneuver. And the second thing that seems to have a problem was that the flight control system seems to have had an error. Now, you probably are asking yourself, what is this flight control system? And I will talk about it quite a bit. Now, in control systems, you have two types of controllers. When we come out of here, you will be able to know which one is which. I will test you. I have questions to test you. So the first one is called an open loop control system. So an open loop takes some data and it goes into a controller. The controller is normally some form of a mathematical model, and there is something wrong with this mathematical model. I'll tell you what the complexity of controllers are becoming, especially in the advent of artificial intelligence. And then the controller will basically tell the system that accelerate this much or descend this much, the angle of attack must be this much, and so on and so forth. And once it makes this recommendation, it sends what is called an actuator signal. Actuator is basically something that will push. It's normally electric motors. It will push something so that more fuel will come out and so on and so forth. It sends this actuator to a plant. So for an aircraft, a plant will be the aeroplane itself. So this is a model. It recommends what needs to be done. After it has recommended what needs to be done, then it is done on an aircraft, and you have an output. But this is an open loop control system. An open loop control system does not have feedback, which means whatever the controller does, your mathematical model should be so accurate that the output is what you desire. Does that make any sense? Now, this is an example of an open loop control system, a washing machine dryer. When you wash, you're using the machine, obviously, not in the river as you do at Mahlawati. So you basically put your clothes inside and you do some dials and it happens. So there is no feedback that says that after 5 minutes the clothes are this clean. Adjust. It doesn't do that. So it's open loop. So there is no feedback. And the dryer is the same. You will have your desired time, and then the electrical energy, timer, and then it is going to control how long that hot air is going to be done. And then the heating elements, these are basically things that are going to heat, to generate heat, and that heat is going to go to the clothes and they are dry. And sometimes, it's better now, when I was an undergraduate, you will do everything right here, and after the fact you realize that the clothes are not completely dry. Can you remember that thing? And then you hang them outside your room or something like that, Dr. Vukuza, you remember this?
Yes.
When I was brewing mkomboti, because that was my job after I finished my postdoc. So I arrived at South African breweries, and one of the first problems that I was given was that we need to control the brewing process. And I asked, why do you need to control? He says, no, because, we say that Castle Lager is 5.5 alcohol, percent alcohol. But if you actually go and test each one of them, sometimes it's a 6, sometimes it's a 5. For those of you who have been to India, I have been to India many times. There used to be this beer called Kingfisher. And Kingfisher, I don't think, it was maybe 16 years ago. So you will get the same bottle. At one stage, you will drink it and it's like water. At another stage, you will drink it and you will just sleep, because it will knock you off. So basically, of course, you as customers don't test. You think that 5.5 actually it doesn't mean 5.5. If you test, some of it will be higher, some of it will be lower. So what they wanted us was to design an open loop control system that will be able to give you something that is as close to the specifications for the brewing as possible. I think it's important to understand the concept of control so that when you go back to the aircraft, you'll be able to understand. So what normally you will do, you put your desired pH, color, alcohol, etc. It's about 7 variables that they measure. And then the control model will obviously look into how the system works and will make a set of recommendations. And then once those recommendations are made by the controller, then they are actuated in the brewery. The timers, how long should the fermentation process last, all those factors, very, very important. And then you get the outcome. Again, this is an open loop control because as it is brewing, it does not get the outcome until the process is done. So for open loop controller, for all controls, your model is very, very important. But this is more important because you do not have the opportunity to correct while the process actually starts. So the controller itself, how does it look like? So this is what we did. So you have what you call in a neural network, and this is actually where the problems actually start. You have a model, you have an input, and the output. So you create a model which every time you give it an input, it is able to give you the output. So once it is able to do that, you can be able to say, what should the input be? The input is what you're going to actuate so that I can get the output that I desire. And you do this by doing some optimization method after you have identified the model, and then the optimization model will say, for you to be able to get this level of accuracy, this is the set of input that you need. And this set of inputs will become the actuators to the plant. That's really what it is all about. So, and then we did this. I actually designed this. I went and looked for it. I designed it about 18 years ago. So it was a very nice thing. And all these are the parameters that you need to do. Some of the parameters is fermentation vessel, what happens in the fermentation vessel, the heat up time, the malt, the yeast. The yeast even had a generation. I don't know whether you know how alcohol is done. Basically, alcohol is sugar water. You basically take water, you put sugar, and then when the water is very sugary, then you put some single cellular organism called a yeast. You put it inside, it basically eats the sugar and gives out alcohol and carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide is sold to Afrox. And then that yeast is reused. So one of the things here will be the yeast generation. Is reused, and after about 5 generations, generation means you put it back in another brew, then it's no longer used. And then they use this used yeast to make some product called Marmite. You know that? Do they still have it?
Yeah.
It's the byproduct of Marmite. So you can see the complex business model of the South African breweries. So it's not only alcohol that they actually sell. They sell carbon dioxide, and they also sell used yeast that makes a Marmite. So that's basically what the open loop system that we do. So somebody will punch certain things here, and it will tell them what you needed to do, and then they will go to the plant and effect these variables. This is another example of the work that we did on open loop controller. The country there was an imaginary country. So what you do when you are doing interstate conflict, your desired state is peace, not war. You know, and then obviously you have a model, and this model would almost look the same. So you have 7 inputs: the distances between the countries, the degrees of militarization, and it predicts whether it is peace or war. And if it is war, you go back and say, which controllable variables should I manipulate and how should I manipulate them so that the outcome will be peace. So do you all understand what an open loop controller is?
Yeah.
Okay? Now there is this, the one that is used for the Boeing is called the closed loop controller. Now here is an open loop controller as we described it. But what happens is that it goes back, feedback, to find out how far am I from my desired state. So if a pilot sends a command and say, aeroplane, go to the altitude of 1,000 meters above ground. So the controller will basically recommend what you need to do. But here is not a single step that it needs to do. It is what is called an event horizon. What steps, set of steps, we call them Markov steps. We use Markov processes to be able to model this. What set of steps should it take in order for it to be able to reach the destination? And at any given step, it evaluates how accurate it has been, and then it tweaks the controller, and then certain things are changed, it actuates, and then it keeps on getting feedback on how far it is. That is what you have a feedback controller. So now, questions. Is inflation targeting an open loop or closed loop control system? Is it closed? So you think the Reserve Bank, every day, they are measuring where the inflation is and having policy interventions?
No, but the review, did they have a policy review after a while, and then if it's up, they correct it?
Yes.
So you have basically a feedback loop.
Yeah.
Okay. Is a light switch an open loop or closed loop control system?
It's closed at the beginning and then open at the end and then it opens up. It's a feedback, right? It's a feedback.
I think he's right. He's right. But the light switch, do you think it's open or closed? It's open. Yeah, clearly there is no feedback on how bright the light is and it goes back. By the way, a friend of mine invited me for Shabbat dinner. So I went, and then there was light, and the food was warm. By the way, you are not supposed to light any light during Shabbat. So I asked him, how do you manage to do this? He says, no, we use preset switches. So where we set it 8 o'clock, the stove must start must start doing this, Do you think that will be closed loop or open loop? It's open loop because it's all preset. Is an air conditioner an open loop or closed loop control system? Okay, one. Jody seems to. Some are, listen, some are open and some are closed. You see, when I was doing a PhD, I used to live in this place called Park Parade at Cambridge. It was a house. So the showers, I'm not lying, it must have been some engineer who came and sold them this thing. It was quite not a very useful. So you get out of the room and you do the temperature and so on and so forth. Then you go back inside. And obviously controlling temperature is very, very difficult, So the system just never worked, So you rush back, and everybody can see you're coming in and out, So that was an interesting system. Of course, it's a dishwasher, an open loop or a closed loop system. It's open. So I think you now are experts in control systems. Now, you still remember that thing called a controller. What does it depend on? So basically you have two things that the controller is supposed to understand. You have the internal environment and you have the external environment. The internal environment is what is happening to the frame of the aircraft. That's really what it is all about. And for you to be able to do this, you use something called finite element model. This is an example of finite element model. You basically break this aircraft on a computer into small pieces and see how they interact. If it bends here, what happens to the rest of its body? So this is an example of a finite element model. Now the problem number one is that the finite element models are not necessarily accurate enough to describe the exact situation. So that is why in finite element model you have something called finite element model updating. By the way, I wrote this book with Sandipan Adhikari and Elias Polkaibet. So what finite element model updating does is that you are basically making your model more accurate. You obviously generate a model and you go and test it on an aircraft and you tweak the model until it is accurate. So that is the first part that it depends on. The second one, I'm not intimidating you. This is from NASA. The second one is the outside environment. How air is moving and so on and so forth. This is very, very difficult. One of the reasons why I left engineering, mechanical engineering, was because of this. One of my study partner, Yoichiro Endo, Yoichiro, we used to study together. He was from Tokyo. Now he lives in Maryland. So he told me, he says, no, he decided that he's going to do a PhD in robotics instead of aerodynamics. And he said he is tired of the Navier-Stokes equations. It's not Navier-Stokes equation, it's actually Navier-Stokes equations. So this set of equations describe how the air moves around the frame, And part of the reason why I really was eager to leave this discipline is because these equations have not been solved. They are one of the millennium problems that still need to be solved. You know, you had the Poincare conjecture that was solved by a professor at Cambridge University. Most recently, you had it was the Poincare to say that you can never have integers xn plus yn equals to zn if n is greater than 3. Yeah. So these things are exciting. You should be excited about it. You should be excited about it. So basically now, so when we were doing fluid mechanics, you are doing fluid mechanics. So they make all sorts of assumptions. Let's suppose, and then they solve how the air is going to move on the wing. Then they take a wing and put it on something called a wind tunnel. By the way, we don't have a wind tunnel here. So a wind tunnel is that you basically get the wind, blow the wind. I think the CSIR has a wind tunnel. You blow the wind over an aircraft and see how it is going to behave in a lab. And you take all the measurements. And after you take the measurements, you say, but how far is the assumed solution of this from the real one? And normally it is quite far. So many people in fluid mechanics, they introduce a concept called a fudge factor. You know about the fudge factor. CD, to calculate the real drag force given your calculated drag force, So that really is what worried me, that you are fudging too many things in that discipline. So, but the aeroplane must fly. So, consequently, aeroplane manufacturing is almost done through test and error. You almost have to have some experimentation before, almost for every flight. That is why it's a very expensive technology. Now we understand controllers. We understand open loop and closed loop controllers. We understand controllers. We understand how to model the inside of the plane using finite element model. We understand how to model the outside of the plane using Navier-Stokes equation, and we understand how to fudge the answers so that the Navier-Stokes equation can be able to predict what happens. Now, what can go wrong with a controller? Now, if you go and look at any control book, the models are very neat. It's normally a second-order differential equation, and you can be able to do a lot of things. Maybe just before then, control systems are everywhere in our lives. And now that we are living in the fourth industrial revolution, the controllers are becoming artificial intelligence controllers. And there are problems with that. The big problem is that the people in artificial intelligence don't worry about stability. The concept of stability of artificial intelligent machine is almost a dead field. Nobody really spent a lot of time doing it. Whereas the control specialists, traditional control specialists, spend a great deal of time worrying about the stability of the controller. So because these controllers of the fourth industrial revolution are intelligent, and they are driven by technologies such as artificial intelligence, the infusion of artificial intelligence into controllers is making them unstable. So we obviously need to develop stability theory for intelligent systems, for intelligent controllers. For traditional controllers, you have techniques such as, maybe I'll talk about this a little bit later. And the last thing that we need to do because of this, we probably must have critic systems that look at what a controller is saying and verify whether what it is saying is correct. And if it cannot be able to verify, then it should be able to to nudge the pilot, no, in fact, to inform the pilot to fly the aeroplane on manual, not on autopilot. What can go wrong with a control system? The first one, wrong model. Non-linearity versus non-linearity. This is basically means, linearity means, yeah, you know what linear is, linear regression. Non-linear regression, more like that. Model identification might be wrong. You might not have identified the correct model, and it might not be robust enough. The second one is that it might actually be collecting wrong data. Because that feedback, the feedback mechanism, has to be picking up the correct data. If it is not the correct pitch, the controller is useless because it is using wrong information. So, and this might also be due to failure of sensors. The sensors might just have drifted away because they're becoming older, you know, and so on and so forth. The other one can be inadequate actuation, because once the controller recommends what needs to be done, then the actuators must do whatever needs to be done. So if your electric motor is not working very well, maybe it's not going to work as robustly. The other, and when it comes to actuation, if it is deterministic actuation, it's easier. If it is stochastic, which basically means, you know, chaos, isn't it? You know, then you also have additional problems. Instability, it can become unstable. Of course, in control system, Ruth Hewitz, German mathematicians, more than 100 years ago, actually came up with a criteria of making linear systems stable. You know, Ruth Hewitz, avoiding the poles. Then the other one, I actually spent a lot of time in the lab worried about this. It's called settling time. So if you want a controller to do something, how long does it take it to be able to do it? Very, very important. So normally, it will, if you want to go to a specific height, then it will go up, overshoot, always overshoot. Then undershoot, overshoot, undershoot, and then it becomes closer and closer and closer and closer. That is called settling time. So for mission critical problems, such as an aircraft, settling time is very, very important. Because if it settles, you know, with a delayed settling, then it can actually become quite dangerous. Now, there are other things that might also have gone wrong. In 2018, Boeing allegedly spent $15 million on political lobbying. By the way, this is recorded things. You know, in the United States, they regulate how much you can donate to a political party. But you have the PAC, which basically means that organizations can go and buy adverts themselves without necessarily involving the politician. That is not counted. And so the idea that there was lobbying, political lobbying, probably explains the fact that it seems that the regulators were relying on Boeing engineers to be able to evaluate whether it meets the standards or not. The second one is that Boeing is the largest supplier of aerospace goods to the United States government. In fact, Boeing manufactures Air Force One. You know what Air Force One is? And interestingly, United States was one of the last countries to ban this Boeing. The Chinese were very, very quick. It was a matter of hours all the Boeing 737 were banned, and many countries followed, but the President of the United States still. In fact, it was almost like 4 or 5 days. The planes were actually flying. So what was happening, it seems there was a possibility of a toxic confluence of politics, money, and lobbying that were at play. And if we were to use the South African terminology, the regulatory framework apparently might actually have been captured. So the state of capture is obviously quite important. Now, in conclusion, I think we need to understand the complexity of the fourth industrial revolution and its downside. So we are very excited about what artificial intelligence is doing, but we sometimes don't worry too much about its downsides. In banks where we are using artificial intelligence machines to make decisions, we forget that even though the decisions are transparent in the sense that you can see the numbers, but they are not explainable. You can't explain why somebody was denied a loan and so on and so forth. We obviously should guard against the toxic confluence of politics, economics, and lobbying, which is normally driven by the principle of the maximization of profit. You know, a rational businessman or woman maximizes their profit. I think we also need to capacitate our countries, our universities, so that they are able to analyze this. So when the plane crashed, they found the black box. The black box is actually everything that is recorded. When it was recovered, it was taken to France to be analyzed. It's quite serious, isn't it? It probably talks about the capability of Ethiopia to be able to analyze this. So it's something that we really need to start thinking about. So in conclusion, the Ethiopian Boeing 737 crashed because of faulty data that could not read the pitch data accurately, and possibly the unstable feedback control model. Thank you very much. Okay. Do we all understand?
Question.
Yeah.
So, my question has two sides. The first side is on the policy side. So you have a company like Boeing working with, having all this technology. They work with Lockheed Martin, they build satellites. They are very advanced in the understanding of the technology. On the other side, you have the government, which is represented by the FAA, and these guys, they're no longer equipped or they're no longer knowledgeable enough to control what Boeing is doing. So let's now expose it to the South African model. So you have companies which are very advanced with who can afford engineers, and the government cannot afford the same type of engineers. And the design system who are more complicated, and the government cannot regulate it, they don't understand it. We're going in the world where us as consumers or people supposed to use those things, we don't understand it, and the government do not understand it. So where are we going? Are we supposed to be? Is our future brighter or darker?
You see, the problem is the problem you are raising is characterized as the problem of information asymmetry. And normally when you have information asymmetry, exploitation is almost a natural consequence of that. So if you go and you're trying to sell a piece of a device, let's say it's a mirror in exchange for land. Then, unless both parties know the value of the assets they hold, one person is going to be ripped off. And unfortunately, the situation we are talking about is actually what is happening. There's no way the FAA will have the sort of engineers that Boeing has. And now the question is, how do you regulate in an environment where the knowledge is so unbalanced that even if they pretend to be doing what they are supposed to do, they probably are not doing it to the best of how it is supposed to be done. So that is the question of our time. And what is happening is that the private space is becoming even more complicated. I watched the video when Mark Zuckerberg went to Congress.
Yeah.
And the questions that those congressmen were asking were quite frankly embarrassing. It was very, very clear that Mr. Zuckerberg was having a very, very good day. So it's a big issue, And now it's even worse when you come here, because Ethiopia is in the dark. You might find out that there is no single person in Ethiopian government that knows what the Navier-Stokes equation is. So it's a problem. How many of you know what the Navier-Stokes equation is?
I'm a businessman and a bus manufacturer. I use the equipment analysis in building buses, So I've done a diesel bus that manufactures by most in South Africa, and we test it. As you said, that there's a regulation problem, to say that, SAPS or XLS does not necessarily have the capacity to do that. So in absence, based on ethics, in absence of regulation in a specific country, you go and use the standards that are applied in another country. So we'll use European standards in terms of testing our bus. So now with the bus that is compliant into the European standards in terms of that, And then fast forward, now we're building a hydrogen fuel cell bus, or engine, or compartment and all of that. But because of regulation, no one is going to be able to legislate it. They'll take a copy paste from other legislation from other environments. But those are the things that are holding us back to say that we don't want to do things in an ethical manner that will be able to make sure that we can be able to do that. People plagiarize their PhDs and all of that in doing that. So those are the kind of things that it needs to be driven. It's ethics, and I'll say that ethical leadership will take us to the next level if we do it right. So that's my contribution to this kind of challenges. I'm not an engineer, I'm an accountant, got involved in a business which is in engineering. So it's an interest for me to be able to do this thing. But what I want to ask in terms of academia, what are you guys doing in terms of trying to match the gap of what is being taught at the universities versus what is being practiced out there in the market?
I mean, I would like to hope that we try to understand what is going on around us. And what has also worried me quite a bit, I used to be the dean of the Faculty of Engineering. And I used to encourage people to take their sabbatical and go and see exactly what is happening outside. Because you would have and I am a career academic. If you take away the 2 years where I was brewing beer. Unless you have a foot into industry, you will never have an intuition as to what is going on. So that is very important. And obviously universities will have things like industrial advisory boards to be able to look into this. When we do accreditation, we normally will have half of the people will be coming from other universities, half will be coming from industry. But I don't think that is enough. I don't think that is enough because technologies are actually moving very, very quickly. I mean, as I was reflecting on this, I realized that the issue of controllers of, that is quite a funky please share it with me. So I also realized that maybe even the curriculum might actually be a little bit outdated. I used to teach control system when I was still at Wits University. That was one of the courses that I used to teach. Yeah. So, but those are difficult issues. The Technion, Israel Institute of Technology, decided to build part of their campuses inside Google, which basically means you need to go there and actually see what is happening. And the second thing that Google has introduced something like academic fellowships, where they get academics to come and spend time there. That is quite important. I don't know of any company in South Africa that does academic fellowships, for example. Yeah.
You see, as you know, we're streaming, so somebody is asking if you can share with us the MCAS or MCAS. MCAS.
What is MCAS?
What happened? MCAS, this is now slide stream. Boeing created for the MAX large engines under two wings. Due to this, they were forced by FAA to control mechanism called MCAS.
Oh, no, no, it doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
So,
Somebody knows?
The MCAS that they're talking about, when Boeing changed when they made the MAX planes, the 737 MAX, they switched the positions of the engines.
Oh.
Okay, so they made the MCAS system to be able to switch to what you call the wings, to change up the wings according to the attack of the wings.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a sensing system that did that, so that the Boeing 737 MAX had a tendency of nosediving.
Mm-hmm.
Because they moved the engine. So the MCAS system would bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't respond this time, so the plane.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, there was a change in what we call the center of gravity. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you have a change in the center of gravity, it basically means that new dynamics. And basically it was the dynamics that was not understood. And because it was the dynamics that was not very well understood, the control system was not robust enough to be able to control it. Thank you very much for that. Are you an engineer?
I'm a finance student.
Oh. You see, for those of you who don't come from UJ, our finance students at UJ also. Okay?
And somebody says the MCAS explanation was good.
Okay?
Thank you so much again for this talk. I wanted to ask you, you said in passing that there's almost no interest in stability and instability in the field of AI.
Mm.
And I wondered if you could say why, or at least say where there is a lot of interest.
Yeah. No, I mean, the reason for that is because many people who are deploying AI, much of the applications of AI have been focused on image processing. That is not a stability critical system. It has been forecasting of financial variables. That has not been the focus of stability. On making sense of text by Google, in the Google search. Stability is not an issue, because somebody wants to search for something, so you have an engine that will be able to know what they are talking about, even if they misspell. you know, which, by the way, the search engine of the 90s, you wouldn't be able to do. If you miss one single word, it would not be able to search. By the way, even our GPS, the cars with GPS, if you miss one spelling error, it's not able to do. Whereas if you use Google Maps, it will be able to show you. So I think that is just the nature of the problems. The second one is that mathematically, artificial intelligence is much more complex. The equations look more complex than second-order digital equations. And many of them cannot be solved in closed form. So you solve them statistically through averages and estimations and so on and so forth. And as a result, you cannot be able to, I'm sure you can be able to do it. It's just something that we need to focus on it. You know? We'll have to start thinking about how do we, you know, if somebody puts a system like that, how do we analyze the stability? But certainly the stability criteria, Ruth Hewitz will not be able to work because it almost relies on the ability to manipulate polynomials, which will not work if you have hyperbolic tangent functions as you would have on a neural network. Yeah. Thanks.
But that's the thing, it's a diligence of everything at the same time, because we then speak about tricky models in, as opposed to asymmetry, you know, that will be something now historical, ahistorical. But now we're speaking about assimilation and integration and how it works in the tricky models, so that when the feedback goes back to the modeling input, so that the outcome can be something rather than, you know, but that middle part, specifically that part. So how do we fix it? So as you were saying, that we then have integrationist type of models that are relating back to our African perspective. So what it is that I wanted to specifically speak about is African tricky models, as opposed to other foreign type of, you know, models that we have that would then work for us specifically. But I know that is a much, you know, it's not bipolar opposition, it's diametrically opposed, basically.
No, thank you very much. Look, for the moment, have you thought about dropping a rap song? No, but you are raising very, you are raising very important issues, difficult ones. Yeah. You?
I'm wondering about the implication of this with the whole self-driven car situation. Because one of the examples I think you given was very interesting. You say in one of the incidents, it was reversed. The disaster was reversed because the pilot were there to switch off the automation. But now with the whole, car self-driven, they are pushing for the self-driven without any human interference. That will be very counter, to this whole situation then. And then are we moving back to, we need to have two systems, at least in need of intervention?
Look, one of the reasons, obviously a self-driving car is less critical than an aircraft. If it is driving, well, maybe that's not let me take it out because somebody got killed by Uber self-driving car. So one of the reasons why the autopilot, you still need a pilot, is basically to deal with these issues that automation will not be able to deal with. Now your question is, how long will it take for us to have an aircraft where there won't even be a pilot? You will just get inside and then it will move from one place to another. I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be quite a while before we're confident enough for it to be able to just drive itself. But for things that are not critical, like go to airports where you will have trains that will be taking you from one terminal to another. Many of them don't have anybody inside. Yeah. They're just driving you up and down. But it's a controlled environment. There is a track. You know, you don't have to worry about aerodynamics or any other things that might be difficult to predict. So until we are able to have a sense of what is happening, our models for what is happening to the aircraft and what is happening to the air outside are perfect, maybe you will always need a human being to oversee what is
You see,
happening.
this fault data, the sensors can always be wrong. You know, can something get wrong, or the transmission can something wrong. I mean, something can always be wrong.
No, absolutely, absolutely. You know, so I mean, yeah, it's one of the weaknesses. Yeah. Yeah. No, you have already spoken.
Just
No.
I actually I'm an aviation commentator and I've got an online organization called Flies with Aviation, and I must say this was the best or rather this is the most simplified explanation of basically the MCAS system on top of his comment about how the engines are very powerful and they're placed further forward on the fuselage. And basically, the reason why the system was implemented, adding to what he said, is because the CMF-56 engines that they've implemented on the 737 MAX are very powerful. They're very powerful. They literally could create a situation whereby during a situation like a takeoff, they could basically cause the aircraft to basically pitch up a lot. So then that's why then you have the MCAS system that then basically counters that. Because then when you fly above 1,000 feet, it's a basic rule that you have to activate the autopilot and allow the computers to take over. So then now what happens is then, because then you have these very powerful engines that could basically cause a pitch up, then now you have the system that then helps counter that. So then now what's happening is with Boeing is that I think at this point that the system was not really, I'd say, tested and examined to a degree where it's all of these incidents are preventable. But however, that is the reason why they basically come up with this new technology. And given the development of both crashes, it has become a question that new Boeing products, do new Boeing products actually have this new system? And which is why the new generation Boeing aircraft called the 777X has now been delayed, simply because of also the systems that you basically outlined, the political lobbying that has been happening as well, the FAA now being investigated by the Pentagon, and all those parts. Yeah.
Oh, look, I mean, but the fact that because you have thousands of these aircraft, how many? I think it's about 3,000 that are flying.
There's now about 300.
Or 300.
That have been grounded around the world.
Okay, so 300. The fact that only two have crashed means that you do have a control system in place. The problem is that it is not stable. Yeah. The problem is that under certain conditions, because a robust controller, if it knows that it is pitching up, it will pitch it down. Yeah, it will be able to do that, But the problem is if the controller is not robust enough, then you have a problem. If there is a possibility that the data was faulty, which is one of the things that have been reported, then you have a cocktail of wrong model and wrong data. I mean, that is a disaster. Yeah. Okay, Ben Erik.
Can I maybe just make a comment on the control system, because in traditional medicine, there are medicines control board, control council, supposedly controlling medicine. And it's very similar to what you have described, where you have a complicated, because biological systems are extremely complicated, unpredictable. And so what is happening in South Africa and throughout Africa is that there's no traditional medicines that's being commercialized. There's no capacity to control it properly. They avoid the problem, by importing things from overseas where it has been controlled. But there's no examples of local medicines, successful local medicines.
Look,
I think it's for this reason.
So you see, the controlling of a system that includes biological systems is very difficult. In fact, the fermentation process, part of the reason why it's such a difficult thing to control is because the yeast is a living organism.
So there's batch-to-batch variation.
Yeah, so it's a living organism. So you basically have a living organism that is part of your model. Very, very difficult. And obviously the second thing is that you quantify it by a very simple number. The only number that you actually use to quantify yeast there is basically the generation. It's the yeast generation. It must be, there must be other factors, that are important rather than just the generation. Yeah?
Thank you. Prof, one, I'm excited. Congrats on the appointment as deputy in terms of the 4IR. May I ask, even in terms of some of the problems you've mentioned, and I don't have any background regarding floods, would the data then, is there hope, even with this unfortunate incident, for us to start maximizing and using the dead airspace, to then start using smaller flying vehicles and drones to transport people even provincially between metros? If you're trying to get from here to Pretoria using the old helipad infrastructure to use their drones and actually then start solving this Navistoke problem by then continuously growing and using smaller vehicles, which we then can map and reduce the variables compared to all those calculations you saw.
Look, I mean, it's an interesting approach to the Navier-Stokes equation. But if you do actually solve that, there is a $1 million prize waiting for you. It's called the Yeah, okay.
Okay, back to stability. My question would be, would I be right if I say AI systems are not stable because of machine learning? Like the intention is that they keep on learning so that we can get closer to being stable as we require. I don't know, would I be right if I say
No, I think stability is not because of machine learning. If you were to take a classical control problem where you can write mathematics, you can be able to get Ruth Hewitt's criteria that will tell you that don't do this, don't do that, operate in this regime, and so on and so forth. And it will be able to work very robustly. It was developed more than 100 years ago. Now, if you start putting AI systems that we just developed recently, with data, because it's basically quantitative control once you start having AI. The model will have to depend on collected data. So mathematically, it's not a clean problem to solve. And secondly, if we, there is this statement, all models are wrong, but some are useful. It was not my statement. It was George Box, a famous statistician. Then that also adds to instability. And some of the instability, by the way, without even getting into the instability of control, the flight dynamics is actually fundamentally an unstable thing to do. I mean, one of the most unstable air vehicle is a helicopter. The helicopter is completely unstable. It's not symmetrical. It's normally, and so on and so forth. How they were able to make helicopters stable is actually quite impressive. That we have a technology that was developed. So I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that it's called machine learning. I think it is just that we have not studied enough to be able to understand the problem. Yeah. Two more. With fresh hands. Rudy?
Thank you, Jen. Prof, I just want to check. It was worrying, by the way, I'm not a
accountant nor an engineer. I just wanted to check. It was worrying when you said the aircraft manufacturing is almost by technologies as a bit of trial and error. It's worrying. Now, AI, if you've shared with us, and by the way, it was very simplified. And those who are not into engineer would love the subject matter. I just wanted to check, in aviation, by the way, that's my favorite program that I watch, aviation, the investigation and aviation disaster. Is there a model, now we all know about the black box, they can actually, it's the record of everything that happened on the aircraft. Now, is there a model, normally when they investigate aircraft disasters, they need to start somewhere, and obviously there's some information that needs to be available. Is there a model that they normally use essentially to approach aircraft disaster investigation, or does it really not matter? That is the black box the root of the approach?
No, look, I mean, the black box is basically information. So you are collecting information as to what actually happened, you know. So, so I think that is a very important part of the evidence, to be able to piece things together, you know. Obviously, they will go and look at the wreckage, you know, what is the nature, and they can be able to tell whether it was the explosion of the engine and so on and so forth. And then that might actually be the issue, you know. Yeah. Last one.
Thank you, Prof. Once again, congratulations on your appointment as deputy. It actually coincides that President Ramaphosa was actually releasing the new process in Cape Town this afternoon, so it's quite a smart one. My question, Prof, is that Europe, in its adaptation to the fourth industrial revolution, they studied the population, that we have a higher elderly population and a very low younger population. So how do we adapt to the fourth industrial revolution? That means it will change the line of work. So it's much easier for me to walk into Pick and Pay, grab a packet of sweets, scan, and walk out, because we don't need to employ people because of the population. And how China's adopted this race that there's self-driving cars and buses, and Russia, quite frankly, they haven't started, but they plan to, in the long term, make military self-flying airlines and military self-sailing boats, so that it can integrate how the fourth industrial revolution and human casualties can be lowered in wars. My question to that is, with all this different variances happening, Europe, scanning through machineries, will it change the level of accountability? Because if we develop our own flights, I mean, if we develop our own plane that takes off without a pilot and it crashes, do we then blame Boeing, or do we blame the system itself? Or how would it work, changing accountability in the future?
Look, I mean, this is, obviously the more we automate, the more we need a new type of law that regulates that. And it's already a problem. Uber's car killed someone. Who is responsible? Was it the chief technical officer? A guy called Zubin Garamani, quite a famous guy in artificial intelligence. Because clearly a self-driving car will not go to the road without the chief technical officer siding that go to the road, you know. Secondly, these devices are evolving. So if you go and analyze its component, its brain, if there's such a thing such as its brain, its ability to make decisions, when it is deployed, and you go and analyze it after it has been driving itself on the road for 3 years, it is nothing like what it looked like initially. And the reason for that is because it is basically capacitated to evolve, to be able to improve itself and so on and so forth. So who is responsible? A classic example is children. Our legal framework says that if you and your partner have a child and he goes and commits a crime, it has nothing to do with you. You can't be arrested for that. But you made that child. You made the child, but the fact that you made the child is not good enough, because the person, the child, where he's old, he can be able to take independent decisions. And I think that same principle applies to a self-driving car that has evolved. But yeah, I'm not a legal expert, but that's what I'm thinking, But those, but it's exciting. But what it means that our lawyers must understand technology. We should have a class of lawyers who first go and study engineering, then they go to law school, so that they can be able to write laws that make sense. But currently, we don't have that. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Vice-Chancellor, this was great. I was sitting down listening to the Vice-Chancellor and worried about this phone. I was like, it is going to ring because I forgot it here. My God, what did I do? Thank you very much, Vice-Chancellor. Whenever you come and speak with us, we learn more. And I think I'll get into a little bit understanding what is happening. Whether it will cure my fear of flights, I don't know. I think actually we might have made it worse. Now, what is exciting about this place, Jayas, is that we're listening to an engineer talking about planes. When you come here tomorrow at 12, you'll be listening to a historian talking about the Khoi-Xhosa wars of land repossession. That will be between 12 and 2. When you come at 2, there will be a group of writing fellows who will be talking about Chinese business spaces in Johannesburg. When you come next week, there will be somebody talking about migration in Southeastern Africa. When you come after that, there will be an astronomer who will be talking about astronomy, one of the leading astronomers in the world. And then when you come a day after that, there will be the executive director of the World Academy of Sciences talking about using technology. And then when you come up after that, somebody talking about race. I can go on and on. Now, the Vice-Chancellor said to me and Dr. Bukuza when they came here, they said, can you guys keep up? The pace is just too high. Can you do? And I said to the Vice-Chancellor, we are just starting. We are going to do more. And I hope you guys will be coming literally every day because we have something going on at the Johannesburg Institute. It is not just about one thing. We talk about science, we talk about sociology, we talk about history. So there is a lot going on here. And that's the reason why we have this space here, so that we understand the world that we live in a lot better. I was talking with Dr. John Rep, who's one of our visiting fellows. He's sitting there. One of the things that we'll be doing pretty soon, Vice-Chancellor, we are going to have podcasts, so that people who are unable to come here, they can listen to Professor Tshilidzi Marwala talking about why the Boeing crashed. But we might have somebody who's talking about plants, professor about indigenous plants, or we might have Dr. Kumisho talking about land, in Bechuana land, or somebody else talking about something else. So that this space, we just do not come to the physical space, just becomes also a virtual space. It could be, that's the reason why we were live streaming the lecture by the Vice-Chancellor. There are a lot more people who are listening to him and watching him speak. These spaces are what they are about. This space belongs to you. I always tell people we are the custodians, but actually the space belongs to you. And so we invite you to come again to the Johannesburg Institute for Advanced Study and to tell those who have never come here. We are becoming famous also for providing pretty good food. And thank you very much. And the food is served. Thank you.